For loop are usually used to execute a set of statements fixed number of times. It takes the following form. We have the keyword for followed by parenthesis, and all the important stuff goes inside this parenthesis. The inside of the parenthesis has three statements separated by a semicolon. The first one is initialization, second one is condition, and the third one is update clause. Let's look at a flowchart first, which depicts how the for loop runs, and we will then see these three statements inside our for loop parenthesis in great detail. So our for loop is started, and the first thing it does is it runs the initialization statements. After it has done that, Java then checks the condition. Now if the condition is false, then Java stops the loop immediately. But if the condition is true, Java then runs whatever is inside the body of the for loop. After running that, Java then runs the update clause and then goes back to checking the condition. If the condition is true, Java will run whatever is inside the body of the for loop again. It will then again run the update clause and then again check the condition. This will keep on happening until the condition is false, and then Java goes out of the for loop. It's really important to understand this, because without knowing this properly, you won't be able to write correct loops, as a lot of new developers face issue like running infinite loop. In those cases, your program will crash as your loops never stop. Now that you have a better understanding of how for loop runs, let's see what we can put in our initialization, condition, and update clause. The initialization block allows us to declare and initialize multiple variables. Think of this variable as your loop counter, which will keep track of how many times your loop ran already. This block looks something like this. Here I have declared an int variable called CTR, short form for counter, and initialized it to 0. Remember that the initialization block only executes once. The termination condition is evaluated once for each iteration before executing the statements defined within the body of the for loop. The for loop terminates when this termination condition evaluates to false, and this block looks something like this. Here I have wrote a condition that says CTR is less than 5. Remember, a condition should be in a boolean, as counter less than 5 will give us boolean either true or false. I am able to write this in my conditional block. So if my int variable counter starts from 0 and it goes till 5, as CTR is less than equal to 5, so can you guess how many times the loop will run? This loop will run 6 times, as 0 to 5 is 6. Finally, the update clause is usually used to manipulate the value of the variable that you have used to specify the termination condition. Code defined in this block executes after all the code defined in the body of the for loop is executed. In this case, I have written counter is equal to counter plus 1, which means that every time after the for loop body is executed, I will increment my counter variable to 1. This is really important to do, because if you will not update your variable counter, your counter variable will always be 0 and your termination condition will always be 0, and it will keep on passing, because 0 will be less than 5 and your loop will never end. So make sure you either increment or decrement your variable based on whatever scenario you have. Now let's look visually how this loop runs in the scenario. So we have this for loop, and the first thing it does is it runs the initialization block. After it has done that, Java then checks the termination condition. As 0 is less than 5, so the condition is true, and Java runs whatever is inside the body of the for loop. Java then runs the update clause, which makes counter to 1, as the old value of counter was 0, and if you add 1 to it, it will become 1. Java goes back to checking condition, and because 1 is less than 5, Java again runs the body of the for loop, and then again it will run the update clause and make the counter variable from 1 to 2. This will keep on happening until our control variable is 6, and at that point our condition will be false because 6 is less than equal to 5, and Java will get out of the for loop. Let's write the print table function with the for loop next.